good morning. Welcome to the Economic Issues Breakout Session. And this session is going to spend all of its time discussing one of the projects that Jorge Ayala referred to this morning in his talk. This is the EDA grant to Lamar University to work on hurricane on resiliency and recovery from Hurricane Harvey and other kinds of things along the way. So this has been a 2-year project, we're at the end phases today, which is why, as you will see in a minute, one of my colleagues will be able to give an overview of what we've accomplished. Dr. Gevorg Sargsyan is assistant professor of finance, and he brings significant experience, again, from the finance and economics sector to us, and also from his long activity before in working with U.S. aid when he was in Europe. So I'm Henry Venta, and I am a professor of management at Lamar University and was dean of the College of Business for many years before my current role. So what we're going to do today is 2 related papers. First, we'll have Paul Latoulet begin with an overall view of what we're doing in this project, and then he will be mostly doing a 10,000 foot view of the whole project. And then so you can actually see the kind of level of analysis that we can do. Dr. Gevorg Sargsyan will be presenting an analysis of the education sector. If you were at this summit last year, you saw Dr. Sargsyan actually present on the oil and gas industry. This paper is, this analysis is quite comprehensive. This paper has already been accepted and will be soon out in publication at a major journal.
Thank you for giving overall view of the project. That was fantastic. Before we begin, I want to give my appreciation to EDA for this funding. Without the funding, I think it will be difficult to conduct this kind of research in this magnitude. And also, a couple of words of appreciation to Dr. Venta, PI, Dr. Sladen, Dr. Colon, and Professor Latoulet. You're an amazing team, and it was a pleasure to work with y'all. And let me talk a little bit about results and explain what we found. And if you remember, if you were with us last year, we came and mentioned the results of oil and gas industry. So basically what we did, we analyzed the main sectors and industries of Southeast Texas, and we tried to understand how Harvey impacted on different industries, and what are the solutions, what are the best practices that these industries can use to overcome and address future economic disruptions caused by natural disasters, pandemics, and etc. So this first slide that I will share is about the importance of education sector in Southeast Texas. According to Texas Workforce Commission, the employment in education sector as a percentage is very significant, and it employs 13 people of population in Hardin County, 7% of population in Jefferson County, and 11.8% in Orange County. So it is a significant contributor in the economy. The second point that we're making, while the share of the GDP in many sectors of the economy in Southeast Texas declined since 2008, the education sector grew, and according to official data, GDP growth of education service since 2018 till 2018, it grew by 12% in Hardin County, 4.8% in Jefferson County, and 7% in Orange County. So you can see the importance in workforce and also importance in GDP. In other hand, we have natural disasters that impact Southeast Texas, and has this negative impact on our economy. So we're mentioning that there are main industries of economy, such as oil and gas, education, real estate, construction, and etc. But we also need to acknowledge and understand that they should be resilient to be able to move forward and grow. So since 2000, Texas saw more than 3 dozens of tropical depressions, tropical storms, and hurricanes, and the major ones caused a significant issues. And next table I will demonstrate, you just saw in Professor Lechule's presentation also. Allison in 2001 caused $12 billion of economic loss, and insurance covered $5 billion of it. Rita in 2005 caused 23.9 billion economic loss and 11 billion covered by insurance. Ike in 2008 caused $43 billion economic loss, and 21 billion of that was covered by insurance. And Harvey, which was the biggest and most devastating hurricane, it caused 125 billion economic loss, and the insured loss only was 30 billion. So this tells us that companies, businesses, doesn't matter if they are small, medium-sized, or large businesses, they need to be prepared, they need to manage their risks, and they need to be able to mitigate the impacts of this risk. So basically, knowing that there are important sectors in the economy of Southeast Texas and there are risks, we started to analyze, and I will talk a little bit about the background. The recovery of this industry, especially education industry, depends on the efficient risk management from natural disasters. And in this study, we used two methods. The first one, we developed a participatory analysis of risk management, PARM methodology. And Dr. Venta, Dr. Sladen, Dr. Colon, and Professor Lechule, they participated in creation of this innovative method. And we used this method to determine best risk management practices of recovery and resiliency of natural disasters in many industries and sectors. The second method that we used specifically in education sector was a comprehensive and comparative analysis of financial data of higher education institutions and school districts of Hardin, Jefferson, and Orange counties of Southeast Texas region during the specific time of period before and after Harvey. And the goal was to determine the financial resiliency and recovery of higher education institutions and school district of our region. Let me talk a little bit about the methodology we created. This participatory analysis of risk management based on PACA method. We adopted method which is emerged from the cooperation between Chamber of Industry and Commerce Brazil and developed by Chamber of Arts and Crafts Germany. And Dr. Meyer Steamer was the architect of this PACA method. And this model first have been used in Brazil, and it uses the theory of location competition and economic development, and it uses a couple of components of economic growth and development developed by Professor Michael Porter, very well-known scholar in Harvard Business School. And this methodology uses the components of Porter's diamond, Porter's 5 forces, and also value chain analysis to capture and understand the structure of each sector of the local economy. And this was an outstanding method because it adopted long time ago. It has been successfully used more than 20 countries by researchers, by universities, by international organizations, local governments, and others. So we took some components from that PACA methodology and we created our own innovative methodology, which has 3 core elements. Participatory analysis of risk management, as Professor Bachelet mentioned in his speech. Those 3 core components are fundamental for this analysis. So we want to engage in conversations with industry leaders and stakeholders of different industries to bring the ideas and to summarize them. We want to get their knowledge and analyze and try to understand how they're managing their risks. And in next slide, I will show you how the PARM workflow worked. So the first step was a research team workshop. We call it as a preparatory phase, where we sat together and we formulated our research questions. We analyzed the value chain of the specific industry. In this case, we analyzed the value chain of education industry, and you will see in a minute. We identified the main stakeholders of industry, and we created a representative group of the entire industry, and we included the influential stakeholders in research. The second phase was the focus group workshops, where we met with those stakeholders and we conducted those focus group workshops to target those specific groups that we wanted to analyze and gather the risk management information. When we collected that information, we came back to College of Business and we started the intensive data analysis. We consolidated the focus group results. We analyzed the obtained data using multiple tools, and we did the extensive research after those focus groups to get more numerical data and support our research. Later on, if there was cases, we organized interviews and we tried to communicate with key stakeholders to get additional information. And the last stage is happening right now when we communicate with the local community. We present the results to the local constituency. And this is very well organized, very comprehensive method, and I hope in other places they will use this methodology to overcome their economic disruptions caused by natural disasters or pandemics or any other risks. So in a first phase, we put together these research questions that we asked these industry leaders and key stakeholders. The first question was, what risks or problems did you experience during Hurricane Harvey? And afterwards, we wanted to understand what were the most successful risk management strategies that that specific group used during Hurricane Harvey and why those were successful. So basically, the best practices. Third question that we asked, were the risk management strategies that were not as successful that were used during Harvey, and again, why? Afterwards, we asked the fourth question, how did you manage the recovery process? Okay, we had the risk, we got to manage, we have best practices, we overcome the disaster and economic disruption. What will be the next, and how we're managing the recovery process, and what risks or challenges this industry leaders encountered during the recovery procedure. We also had specific questions related to technology, including communication, and we wanted to understand what role the technology played in Hurricane Harvey response and what were the most critical technologies that they used and what they will highlight as best practices to use in the future. And the last question, but very important question, was what you would like to see happen if there is another hurricane in Southeast Texas and it is causing an economic disruption, and what steps will help us to move into direction to be more resilient and recover fast. So basically, Dr. Venta, he had his nice approach to talk with people, and he asked them, what is your wish list? What is your wish list? What you want to see the local government do? What is your wish list from the state government or federal government to be better and become more resilient? In next slide, I will demonstrate the value chain of education sector, and this is one of the tools that professor of Harvard Business School, Michael Porter, developed. And when we need to analyze specific industry, we want to understand how value is created and how value moved toward the specific industry. And in education sector, we have school education, higher education, and ultimately job market. In school education, we have these three sub-components: elementary school, middle school, and high school. Afterwards, people can go to two-year institution and get technical education or get university knowledge and have their undergraduate, or they might decide to do grad school and then jump to the job market. So what we did, we identified the Southeast Texas key stakeholders in education sector, and Professor Lachulay's contacts helped us to reach them, and we organized those workshops. In next couple of slides, we will help to understand what are the best practices in different dimensions of education sector, and afterwards we'll jump to the comprehensive financial statement analysis. We differentiated our research, and we addressed different segments. So first, the campus closure and how they addressed the campus closure. Then the campus opening, which was the second phase after hurricane. Afterwards, how it impacted on students. Obviously, students are the key stakeholders of education. And next one, how it impacted on human resource management. So I will go step by step, and I will give you the results, the snapshot of results. So as you can see, I have color-coded in blue, in red, orangish color, and in green each segment. And the blue addresses how they're prepared to natural disaster or economic disruption. The green talks about the best practices, and the orange color talks about the risks. And let me go step by step and talk about those, okay? So the first one, the education institutions' preparedness to hurricanes and storms. Educational institutions follow the National Hurricane Center's updates and instructions to understand what's going to happen and to address those risks. Some institutions have subscription to Storm Geo service to have an additional weather forecasting information. And at the end of the spring, some institutions meet internally to update emergency plans for the season and to get prepared. Education institutions also have some manuals and policies to manage these risks, and these risk management documents also state who is in charge of what in case of natural disasters. So I was impressed to see how well prepared were our education institutions, and they have manuals, procedures, and every time they deal with natural disasters, they excel and become better. Next section will address the risks that related to campus closure. So Harvey was so intensive, and the magnitude was so large that rain came very fast and intensively. So most institutions couldn't not keep up with the rain, and immediately Montaigne Center converted to evacuation center, providing shelter to 500 plus evacuees from the city and also university community. And Red Cross, who came later on after 24 hours and started to assist and have some key role in managing those risks. And in total, in campus, there were 1,400 people, students plus evacuees from cities on campus, which was challenging for Lamar University and also the institutions around. But later on, there was another big challenge. City water shutdown complicated the situation, as campus needed the potable and not potable water. And there were some also buildings that had some serious damage, and the equipments were damaged. So those were significant risks, and it was interesting to discover how efficiently they managed and how they overcome those risks. So the best practices, first one, the emergency team with the leaders of education institutions, most of education institutions, they stayed in campus, and they was impacted by water shutdown. The educational institutions also have plans to purchase some diesel generators and generate. Some education institutions, they have plans to raise their facilities to be able to handle future floods, and IT services are replaced far from the campus in other locations to help to continue the education and deliver education online. Next part was the campus opening and the recovery. There were two legislative appropriations that came to help, and 86th regular session provided educational institutions significant support, and Texas Senate Bill 500 made a supplemental appropriation to public institutions, and various institutions, they had already contracts in place to start the repairs and bounce back. There were some significant risks. There were loss of student credit hours that led to institutions' revenue loss. And generally, this loss was short-lived. And FEMA also had some specific procedures and procedures to apply for compensation. Many buildings didn't have electricity generators, and they're trying to fix that issue. And in general, natural disasters with this magnitude, they can have 3 to 5 years negative impact on the education institutions. The best practices, many education institutions, they use drones to survey the damage and understand how to assess the needs of the campus. Due to water shutdown, university campus, they rented the portable toilets to maintain the hygiene conditions, and they also purchased Service Pro, that is a specific company that gets into campus and tries to help to recover and restore the buildings. Obviously, there were risks that impacted on HR, on human resources, on faculty and staff, loss of productivity due to educational institutions' decision to suspend operations. Even if employees didn't report to work, the institution still paid them. And also overtime payment to those who were engaged in recovery efforts. They get very generous compensation, and there's a need and risk that building coordinators need to become better and improve their skills and maintain this building conditions. Well, the best practices, there are some special policies for remote work that have been established, and it is very important, and it helped in the pandemic time. Also, Incident Command Center has been established in many institutions. There are personal policies that state responsibilities for emergency situations and business continuity plans. And there are also a crowdsourcing app that has been made available to better manage the crisis and to help to manage this risk. There are some results of PARP methodology on the impact of students, and I will very quickly talk about those in next 2 slides, and I will jump and briefly conclude the results of comprehensive financial analysis. There was a temporary decrease in enrollment, as I mentioned. There was a risk for not returning school because of specific student population. Taking into consideration also that many students are first-generation students. The majority of students were in residential halls and experienced issues to get food or had parking problems due to flooding. And food shortages in town also caused some problems. The best management practices, well, Lamar University invested, and other institutions also invested a massive amount of money in e-learning resources and in online, and these resources help to continue the education uninterrupted, and education institutions have engaged in more consistent and proactive communication via messaging, emails, and social media, which help to continue the operations. LifeSafe app, which is an amazing app, adopted, and it's used in multiple campuses and various institutions. They created surveys about hurricane impacts, and the last results that we get from LIT was very impressive, and results were outstanding. Financial aid supported students to overcome financial hardship and come back to school, and university also purchased specific vehicle to be able to move forward. So these were the best practices, and in next couple of slides I will show you the financial impact. We get the data since 2014 till 2018 for all major higher education institutions of Southeast Texas: Lamar University, LIT, Lamar State College Orange, and Lamar State College Port Arthur. And you can see the impacts, and you can understand what's going on in financial side. So we get the data from the net position of these institutions. In other words, the balance statement. The total assets and net position is displayed in the first and second line. And you can see that Lamar University, and it's true in other institutions also, didn't get much harm, and their assets didn't decrease much, and their net position didn't get harmed. But what happened was in their statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position, or in other words, in their income statement, we saw the loss of revenues, and specifically loss of revenues from tuitions and fees. And you can see the third line right there. There is a decline in revenues, and specifically in tuition revenues, but later on they recovered, and we can conclude that impact of Harvey in financial sustainability of institution was short-lived, and they were able to recover. As you can see, the expenses increased due to recovery and bringing back to the condition the facilities. And because of Harvey, probably they ended up having negative net position. which is something that needs additional research to understand what happened there. The similar situation was in case of the LIT. The enrollment dropped, and it caused a slightly decline in tuition revenues, in operating revenues, and expenses grew a little bit, but afterwards they were able to overcome and move forward. As you can see, the comprehensive financial analysis for LSC Orange, and you can tell similar story. The expenses increased, the tuition revenues didn't impact it in this case, but they lost operating revenues, and similar situation you can observe in Port Arthur case. In conclusion, this research shows that the education of Southeast Texas demonstrated resiliency and recovery from Harvey. Harvey didn't affect financial health or stability of educational institutions of Southeast Texas, and results show that Hurricane Harvey did indeed impact it negatively on student credit hours. The effect was about 5 to 6% reduction, but it was short-lived because of the financial aid and best risk management practices. Students came back, and the reduction occurred only in spring semester of 2018. By the fall of 2018, the student credit hours had returned to the normal levels, and institutions are moving forward. Harvey also impacted on school districts, but because the school education financially is not dependent on tuition, and government pays for their school, we wasn't able to find any financial difficulties for all school districts of Hardin, Jefferson, and Orange counties. So this was it. If there are any questions, or Dr. Venta, Dr. Sladen, Dr. Colon, Professor Lachule, please add your comments or additional thoughts. Thank you.
So I looked real quick, and there weren't any questions online, but we didn't mention this at the beginning. We probably should have, but if you do have some questions, please submit any of those that are on the summit page. Dr. Venta, did you have any questions to ask?
Actually, I was just going to talk about submitting questions online if you had them. I think the paper that Georg delivered gives you a good indication of the kind of depth of analysis that we did in various sectors. So it's not just waving our hands at problems, but rather using methodologies that lead us to what the crucial aspects are. And the education one had significant findings about what to do and what to prepare, just like the oil and gas one that Paul described briefly. I think one of the most interesting findings in the education paper was that the financial data show that this was a short-lived, non-permanent kind of situation from a financial point of view. If particular institutions were having trouble, it wasn't because their revenue kept dropping, but rather because expenses and things like that were used in a different way.
Also, as Dr. Venta mentioned, we did analyze multiple sectors: oil and gas, education. We're concluding the results of real estate and construction sector, and also we'll look on other aspects of the different sectors. Healthcare was involved, so very interesting results.
Some important work also was done led by Dr. Sladen on trying to understand property values, and there an interesting approach was used. Rather than look at the whole region in one shot, we looked at he and Dr. Sarksian and also some students looked at the Bevel Oaks area in our region which is an area generally prone to flooding, and what happened to their prices. And again, I say that overall, the results, the problems were short-lived. Now, short depends on the homeowner's point of view, right? A year and a half is not short for many people, right? For industry, that would be terrible. But eventually, many of the homes were reconstructed, and there was only a few that were the devastation was so high. But anyway, that's a subject for another presentation. I think, Bruce, we're kind of coming up right to the end of our time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So do we have any questions come in?
I haven't seen any, Henry.
Okay. Ricardo, you have anything you want to say, or James?
Just want to thank everybody online. Yes, thank everybody. And I think, Henry, I just wanted to emphasize the point that you made about the quick recovery. Traditionally, it takes 5 years for the educational sector to recover. And in this case, it was just short-lived. So that was very impressive about Southeast Texas.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thank all of you that are listening from the ether, as we might say. And we appreciate your being here with us. And there's a whole website that you can find within the Lamar University research area about everything we've done. And of course, you're free to contact any of us if you need additional information. Thank you for participating.